Now, Discovery has recently released its 2022 Employee Benefits Claims Data Insights, and they reveal, among other things, a 200% increase in cardio-metabolic condition claims. The organization says this is due to a number of reasons, including long COVID. Other issues, such as cancer, have also seen a shocking uptick. Let's get you more insights on this, bringing the head of product at Discovery Employee Benefits, that Guy Chennells, who joins us via our video link this morning. Guy, great to see you, and welcome to the program. You know, when we were dealing with COVID, at least at the height of the disaster, none of us could predict how much longer we'd have to deal even with the effects of the pandemic. So as a start, help us understand how this phenomenon of long COVID is essentially translating into these chronic conditions, which I understand in some instances are claiming lives.
Yes, thank you. And long COVID can be a basket word. So, you can mean in a small sense that someone has foggy brain, energy loss, etc. for a prolonged period of time. What we meant by referring to it is just that there are knock-on impacts of having contracted COVID,
right,
that play out for some time. We've known for quite a while, about 18 months since a study came out on DHMS, that having experienced a COVID infection, your risk of developing diabetes or a cardiac condition is elevated. And there are a number of other international studies I'm aware of that have a similar finding. What we were able to do now, so even back then we were predicting that would come through in elevated death claims. What we're able to do is we have an overlap set of data of individuals who are on Discovery Health, so we can estimate quite accurately what their cause of death is, and they're on our group life insurance proposition, so we're able to, we know whether they've died or not, and we have good exposure data. So we're able to actually see what this impact is coming through. But your question is around what it is and how it's, what the mechanism is, and that's a little bit opaque, to be honest.
Yeah.
We can link some dots, but there's no straight line. It seems that the factor of having had COVID has these risk factors associated with it that leads to higher deaths. But also the fact of the pandemic has impacted people. People changed their lifestyle behaviors. They were more sedentary on average, and didn't look after their eating, etc., as well as before. They didn't have as much balance in their lives between work and home. There was incredible stress on a lot of people, financial deaths of loved ones, just work pressure. And then you've got people exercising less during COVID. And then the final one, which is very significant, is that we saw a huge drop-off of people going for regular screenings. It seems quite prosaic, but once a year, Discovery really encourages people to go for a health screening. Picks up the kinds of silent killers that result in heart attacks, strokes, aneurysms, etc., such as cholesterol, high blood pressure, etc. And those dropped by 50% during COVID. So in some cases more, and still today are not back to the levels they were previously. So we think there are risk factors that are leading to people developing these conditions more than before. And then there's, on the other side, the risk factor of people not becoming aware of those issues and therefore treating them appropriately.
Yeah. So there are direct and indirect effects from the pandemic, so to speak.
Yeah.
I wonder, you essentially spoke broadly about being exposed to COVID-19. Anecdotally, we've also come across people who are speaking about the effects of having taken a COVID-19 vaccine. I wonder if your data signals any kind of insight around the impact that's having and whether or not that's translating into some of these illnesses.
Yeah, we haven't seen that in our data.
Right.
We follow the government mandate on vaccines. They do a lot of work to come out with a ruling on whether a vaccine is safe or not. We follow that. But we have also, within Discovery Health, been tracking the effect of vaccines, and we can confirm that they are highly effective in preventing serious COVID-19 and the kind of ramifications of that. But that said, vaccines are a health intervention, and every health intervention has risks. So the vaccine must introduce some risk into a person's life. The way up has been that vaccines introduce orders of magnitude less risk than a sort of naked exposure to the virus itself. And so that's why it has made sense to administer vaccines. Not that they are entirely risk-free.
Sure. I suppose, because I see part of what the data also suggests is an uptick, for instance, in cancer-related illnesses. And you spoke about silent killers earlier on. Of course, as people on screening, I imagine they're not able to pick up something like a cancerous cell in the body early enough, and that might obviously lead to the worst case scenario, which is ultimately death.
Yeah, that's a very interesting one. And we are in a fortunate position to be able to triangulate 3 sources of data. We're actually 4. So we're able to see people's screening levels on various types of cancers, and those have been down hugely during COVID and even still down today. We're able to see treatment levels for cancer on Discovery Health Medical Scheme, and those rise every year as cancer becomes more and more prevalent. We expect that. But they took a dip off that kind of average line, a massive dip off that during the COVID period, and have slowly come back to that. And that sort of area represents a number of people who just simply have not gone for a cancer treatment who otherwise would have. The other side of the coin that we're able to monitor that fills out the story is that we see in our disability income product, people often claim for short-term disability income while they go through the arduous process of cancer treatment. And that we've seen with a dramatic drop during COVID. Again, suggesting that people have not picked up cancer and therefore have not entered treatment that they require to be off work for. And then at the same time, the stats that you are alluding to now, we've seen a concomitant increase in deaths due to cancer, actually a very dramatic increase in deaths due to cancer. And so our hypothesis at the moment is people are not picking up cancers. Yeah. It's resulting in them either picking it up too late or not picking it up at all, and therefore dying from cancer, whereas they otherwise would have gone through, a difficult chemotherapy radiation process and survived out the other end.
Sure. So once you compare people who develop these cardio-metabolic conditions because of something like COVID-19 versus those who develop the same conditions but not because of COVID-19, are you finding that treating the illness itself is any different?
I'm not aware of that. I'm not involved in the treatment side, but I certainly haven't heard anything that treating a condition, you treat a condition differently depending on the risk factors are involved in it emerging.
Right.
But to make a point on treatment, the treatment is relatively easy for many of these things, or at least there is a high degree to which you can reduce your risk factors once you're aware of them. You can take a simple pill for cholesterol, for example. And so they're very manageable conditions once you're aware of them, and of course if you are motivated to manage them. Of course there are examples where it's very difficult to manage or something comes out of the blue. But on average, for the most part, they're very manageable. The problem at the moment is simply that people are not aware that they have these conditions.
Speaking of awareness and management, long COVID is still a bit of an enigma. Some people don't know if they've just dealt with months of year-end fatigue, or in fact, it might be something more serious. Their body's taking strain because of having dealt with the COVID-19 infection. From the work that you've been able to do, I wonder whether you get a sense that there's any clarity around, A, how to diagnose this, and B, how to treat it such that it's not as prolonged as the name suggests, that it's not long COVID that you're living with.
Yes. Learnings around this are emerging all the time.
Yeah.
And again, I must premise by saying I'm not an expert in this. But what I am aware of is that, there's a whole range of conditions, as I mentioned at the beginning, that have been lumped under long COVID. And as you rightly point out, there are many risk factors or factors around a person's life that can contribute. Another one that you didn't mention, but is worth contemplating, is the psychosocial pressure that people have been under over the last 2 years, which of course filters through to the way your body reacts. And so it's impossible to unthread all of those issues and work out precisely what the one cause is. But what we can say that is useful is that there have been lots of risk factors. People are reporting that they are struggling with some of the simple kind of activities of life. Being able to concentrate at levels that they were able to previously, having the energy that they had previously, and ways to treat those are continually emerging. I think that is really a hot area of medical study, and so I think we'll get more clarity around how to think about the different types of long COVID in the future and what precisely to do about each one, which of the interventions are effective. I'm certainly aware of experimental interventions on things like long-term fatigue, serious fatigue, that have had some success and then not as much success as they would have hoped. So I know that people are hard at work trying to deal with these new conditions.
Sure. And I guess in the midst of that uncertainty, many people will be interested to know whether or not insurance companies are thinking differently around their own products. This data must mean something to Discovery. Are you contemplating doing things differently?
The one thing we are doing is trying to encourage as much as possible that people screen. Maybe sound like a stuck record. It really is the single most important health behavior that a person can take. Become aware of whether you've got an obvious condition. What we do, maybe a step more than just talking about it, is that we reward people for it. In our group life insurance product that these stats come out of, we give a payback annually for people who have gone for their regular health check. So we give some of their premium back for having done that, because it is such a critical behavior. So that's one thing that we're sort of stepping up and driving as hard as we can. Apart from that, we just remain cautious around how to price and manage risk within the environment. So pricing risk, we're still cautious, and managing risk. We underwrite very few people in a group policy. Only the highest earners actually get underwritten, health underwriting. But when we do that, we're looking out for the impacts of long COVID, for example, in particular, which is something that we wouldn't have been looking for prior to the pandemic.
Sure. Very interesting insights indeed. Guy Chennells, thanks very much for speaking to us. Appreciate your time on the AM Report this morning. Guy is Head of Product at Discovery Employee Benefits. Once again, thanks very much indeed.